911. What's your emergency? A panicked, trembling voice cuts through the cheerful music. She's being attacked. Oh God, the orca has her. She's screaming. We can't stop it. Please, send someone. It was supposed to be another dazzling afternoon. At SeaWorld Orlando, the music blared, the crowd roared, and Elena Reigns, the beloved veteran trainer, the ocean's own ambassador, walked out into the spotlight, completely and utterly unaware that it would be her final, and very tragic, performance. Within moments, the crystal blue water of the show pool would turn a deep and very final red. What happened next wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mishap. It was a violent and very calculated display of a raw, primal power from a predator that had, finally, had enough. 4,000 people watched in a frozen and very helpless horror as a 6-ton orca launched itself, not into the air in a beautiful, choreographed leap, but into her. The cheers died in their throats. And then came the screams. A body thrashed in the water. Blood surfaced, and the pool, which had, just moments before, been a shimmering and very beautiful symbol of an artificial and very magical beauty, became a cold and very real prison of death. This wasn't theater. This was a kill. You're watching Animal Attack Archives, where we go beyond the sanitized, corporate headlines to expose the true, and often very brutal, cost of working with the wild. If this story shakes you, if it makes you question what really lies beneath the glittering surface of these shows, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell, because this is the story of Elena Reigns, a woman who gave everything, absolutely everything, to the creatures she so deeply and so completely loved. And in her final, terrifying moments, they took it all back. Stay with us, because what you are about to hear may change the way you see the world of animal captivity forever. She wasn't just a trainer. To the world, she was a performer, an icon. In a wetsuit, a woman who could command the grand and very impressive stage with a simple and very graceful flick of her hand and a radiant and very beautiful smile. But to those who truly and deeply knew her, Elena Reigns was the ocean incarnate. She was gentle in her spirit, she was immense in her depth, and she was, at times, unknowably and very powerful. Born and raised in Tampa, Florida, Elena had spent her entire childhood chasing the warm, gentle waves along the Gulf Coast, collecting seashells like they were precious and very beautiful treasures, and sketching the playful and very intelligent dolphins in the margins of her school notebooks. Her fascination with marine life wasn't just a passing childish phase. It was a calling that had led her to graduate with the top honors in marine biology from the University of Florida, where she had specialized in cetacean psychology and behavior. What had set Elena apart wasn't just her impressive and very extensive education. It was her presence. She didn't just work with the orcas, she listened to them. She observed the subtle and often very telling shifts in their body language, the quiet and very rhythmic cadence of their breath, the deep and very real emotion that was hidden behind each and every single one of their whistles and their clicks. Her colleagues, the other, and often very jealous, trainers, had often said that watching her work was like watching poetry being written underwater. After joining the team at SeaWorld Orlando at the age of just 22, Elena had quickly, and with a quiet and very powerful grace, risen through the ranks, not by demanding the attention, but by earning the respect of both the humans and the animals. In just over a decade, she had become the senior trainer, a celebrated show star, and the very real and very beating heart of SeaWorld's flagship and very lucrative Orca program. Her connection to Naira, the magnificent and very powerful orca who would, one day, end her life, ran deeper than anyone could have ever possibly imagined. They had trained together for 8 long and very beautiful years. Elena had often said that Naira was a part of her shadow, a part of her soul. But love, no matter how pure, no matter how deep, is not a safety net. And in the strange and very unnatural world of a captivity, even the strongest and most beautiful of bonds can, and often do, fracture. No one knew it then, but behind Elena's warm and very beautiful and very unwavering faith in the animal she loved, a silent and very deadly storm was building, just beneath the glittering and very deceptive surface of the water. And that Storm had a name, Naira, a gentle and very genuine smile crossed her beautiful and very sun-kissed face as she scanned the adoring and very massive audience. And then, she lowered her gaze to the water. Beneath the surface, Naira moved in slow, deliberate, and very beautiful circles. Her massive dorsal fin cut a sharp and very iconic silhouette, slicing through the pool's perfectly blue surface like the keel of a giant and very silent ship. As she rose, her powerful breath erupted in a misty and very beautiful plume, a plume that caught the bright morning light in 1,000 tiny and very magical prisms. The cameras flashed, the children squealed, and for one single, solitary, and very perfect moment, the illusion of a complete and very beautiful harmony between human and beast was complete to the audience. She was a marvel, 22 feet of a sleek and very powerful muscle, and a black and white and very beautiful grace, gliding so effortlessly through the water that shimmered under the bright stage lights. The children would gasp as she would leap so magnificently into the air. The cameras would click in a constant and very adoring awe. But behind that awe lay something much older, much darker, and far, far more dangerous. Naira wasn't born at sea. She was ripped from the icy and very wild waters off the coast of Iceland as a 3-year-old calf, her own very real family's desperate and very frantic cries echoing into the loud and very indifferent blades of a chopper. She had spent the next 2 long decades of her life behind the cold and very unforgiving concrete walls of a sterile and very unnatural enclosure, a world that was just a fraction of the size of her own vast and very beautiful natural range. Over time, she had become one of the park's most bankable and most celebrated stars. She was obedient, she was photogenic, and she was incredibly and very powerfully powerful. But like so many of the other captive orcas, her obedience had come at a terrible and very hidden cost. Behavioral logs, some of them buried so deep in the company's internal reports, documented a long and very troubling history of a series of an increasingly and very dangerous incidents. In 2007, Naira had refused to surface for a queue, leaving a trainer stranded in the middle of the pool for over 30 long and very tense minutes. In 2009, she had forcefully, and with a great and very deliberate violence, splashed another trainer against the hard concrete wall of the tank. By 2011, she was displaying a whole and very new and very alarming range of a new and very disturbing behaviors, the tail slapping, the jaw popping, and the long and very eerie bouts of just floating, motionless, in the water. All of them the classic and very undeniable indicators of a profound and very real psychological stress. But the public, of course, never saw this side of her. To them, Naira was just another beautiful and very magical miracle of a marine training, a magnificent and very powerful creature who had been so lovingly and so completely tamed by a simple and very beautiful diet of a love and of a fish. And to Elena Reigns, she was more than just a partner. She was a soul she so completely and so utterly believed in. Perhaps that is why the warnings, the quiet and very professional and very real warnings, went unheard. Perhaps her own very deep and very profound love had blurred the very real and very dangerous line between a trust and a danger. But those who were closest to the tanks, they saw what all the others had so willingly and so completely refused to admit. Naira was changing. Her gaze, which had once been so full of a playful and very intelligent light, now lingered for just a second too long. Her movements grew more and more erratic. She had begun to swim in these tight and very obsessive circles, something that has never, not once, ever been seen in the wild. And then, she had turned that new and very different gaze toward Elena, not with an affection, not with a playfulness, but with an intent. Something primal had awakened beneath Naira's composed exterior, a creature sculpted by oceans, confined by walls, and slowly unraveling from the inside out. Naira wasn't unraveling quietly. Her descent was loud if he knew how to listen. But that was the problem. Too many chose not to. In the final weeks leading up to the attack, the signs multiplied, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Naira began regurgitating her food mid-performance. Her appetite plummeted. She would circle the tank for hours in the same tight loop, nose pressed just inches from the concrete. Her eyes, once alert, took on a distant, eerie stillness. And then she began watching Elena, not following commands, just watching. During rehearsals, she would drift just beyond arm's reach, ignoring cues she'd once performed with precision. When backup trainers intervened, she didn't resist, but she didn't obey either. She simply floated there, holding Elena's gaze, not with connection, but with something closer to calculation. Experienced trainers noticed. Some whispered it backstage, others wrote it in logs, categorized as training resistance or low motivation. But one trainer, Daniel Vega, went further. He approached management directly. "There's something off about Naira," he warned. "She's unpredictable. She's watching Elena like prey." The response was polite, procedural, and dismissive. Elena herself waved it off. "She's just in a phase," she said. "She's moody sometimes. I know her." But this wasn't a mood. It was an escalation. 3 days before the show, maintenance staff found deep gouges etched into the tank wall, long jagged scrapes where Naira had rammed her rostrum again and again. It was logged as a territorial display. No one connected the dots. Or maybe they did and looked away. After all, Naira was still the star. And Elena, she still believed in the bond. But faith, when placed in the wild, untempered soul of a captive predator, can become a kind of blindness. And that blindness was about to cost everything. February 17th, 2012. The air above Shamu Stadium shimmered under the Florida sun. 4,000 spectators packed the stands, cotton candy in hand, cameras raised, waiting for magic. The music pulsed through the loudspeakers, loud, hopeful, theatrical. Another afternoon of wonder was about to begin. Backstage, Elena Reigns was calm. She'd done this routine hundreds of times, checked the rigging, prepped the signals, reviewed every beat of the performance. But to those who looked closely that day, something in her smile was stretched a little too tight, her laughter just a touch too rehearsed. Still, she stepped forward, her wetsuit shimmering under the stadium lights as she emerged into view. Waving, radiant, the crowd erupted in cheers. Children leaned against the glass. Behind her, the great black and white silhouette of Naira glided silently through the water, a living sculpture in motion. The show opened flawlessly. Naira executed spins, breaches, and tail slaps with choreographed grace. Elena's cues were crisp, fluid. Every movement met with delight. But behind the scenes, seasoned trainers watched with growing unease. Naira's breathing was off, her movements just a fraction too sharp, her attention lingering too long on Elena and not the signals. No one called it off. At 3:17 p.m., Elena approached the edge of the pool. It was time for the finale, the rocket hop, a maneuver where Naira would surge upward beneath her, launching the liner high into the air. The crowd leaned in. Elena gave the signal. Naira dove, and the world held its breath. What surfaced next was not the show anyone expected. She was supposed to rise. That's what the audience expected to see. Elena launched skyward, arms outstretched, triumphant above the splash. A moment of pure spectacle, a memory for cameras and scrapbooks. Instead, Naira exploded from below, not beneath Elena, but into her. The impact was brutal. Bone met rostrum with unforgiving force. Elena's body snapped backward, slammed into the surface, and vanished beneath the glittering blue. For a split second, the crowd clapped. They thought it was part of the act. Then came the scream. It cut through the music like a razor. Raw, panicked, real Elena resurfaced, thrashing, one arm flailing toward the platform. But before she could reach it, Naira struck again, this time with purpose. Her jaws clamped around Elena's midsection, pulling her under in a blur of black and red. This wasn't a slip. It wasn't confusion. It was a deliberate, violent act. The pool, moments ago a stage, became a battlefield. Trainers rushed into position, deploying air horns, tossing nets, shouting desperate commands. But Naira was beyond reach. She dove deeper, dragging Elena's limp form in her teeth, the water above boiling with motion. Spectators screamed, some fled, others stood frozen, hands covering mouths, eyes wide with horror. Parents shielded children from the growing cloud of blood, spreading across the tank. Security scrambled to clear the exits. Radios crackled with mayday calls. 3 minutes passed. Then Naira surfaced, Elena still locked in her jaws, unmoving. Her wetsuit was torn. Her limbs dangled. Her face was hidden beneath streaks of red. Gasps rippled through the stands. And then, without warning, Naira dove again, vanishing into the depths, as if trying to erase what she had done. On the platform, no one moved. No one breathed. The unthinkable had become real, and the water would never look the same again. Panic turned to action, but action came too late. Alarms wailed across the facility. Trainers sprinted into position, grabbing every tool within reach. Rescue poles, throw nets, buckets of fish. Air horns screamed over the intercom. Each blast meant to startle Naira into releasing her grip. She didn't flinch. Far below the surface, she held Elena with the chilling calm of an apex predator in control. She would surface just long enough to breathe, Elena's body still in her jaws, then disappear again into the pool's depths. It became a cycle of hope and horror. Every appearance a tease, every dive a sentence. Rescue divers stood by, waiting for a clear window to enter the water, but none came. As long as Naira remained agitated, any entry meant risking another life. Medical staff arrived on deck, watching helplessly. Their emergency gear was ready, but their patient was still trapped, beneath the water, unreachable. 3 minutes, then 5, then 7. By the time Naira finally surfaced and let go, Elena floated face down in a crimson haze. No movement, no breath. Divers rushed in, pulling her to the side platform where medics began CPR immediately. Compressions, oxygen, defibrillators. They fought with everything they had, but the damage was already done. No one said it aloud, but every face on that deck knew. They weren't saving her. They were just refusing to let go. When the medics stopped compressions, the air felt heavier. Elena Reigns was pronounced dead at 4:15 p.m. The cause, massive trauma. And drowning. SeaWorld Orlando went dark. Shows were cancelled. Shamu Stadium was sealed. Guests were escorted out quietly, some still crying, others in stunned silence, clutching souvenirs that now felt grotesque. Within hours, the headlines hit, the footage spread, and the world began to ask the questions SeaWorld had long feared. Why wasn't Naira removed from shows after years of warning signs? Why were trainers still entering the water despite past attacks? Why had no one listened? The official statement was swift and sterile. A tragic incident, an unpredictable animal, a beloved trainer lost. There was no mention of Naira's behavioral history, no acknowledgement of ignored reports, no apology. But the silence didn't last. OSHA launched a full investigation. Witnesses were interviewed. Internal documents were leaked, some showing a disturbing pattern. Safety protocols bent for showmanship, concerns dismissed for profit. SeaWorld stock plummeted 30% in after-hours trading. Behind the scenes, panic set in. Sponsors pulled funding. Trainers tendered quiet resignations. And Naira, once the star of the show, was moved to an isolation tank where she would spend the rest of her life alone, unseen. Elena's death had cracked something open, not just in SeaWorld, but in an industry built on the illusion of control. And now the reckoning had begun. In the days that followed, the noise faded, but the questions didn't. Elena's name appeared across headlines, memorials, and trending hashtags. But beneath the public grief, a deeper reckoning was taking shape, one that demanded not just mourning, but understanding. Marine mammal scientists, long ignored, finally found the world ready to listen. Dr. Adam Kellner, a former SeaWorld trainer, turned behavioral specialist, stepped in front of cameras with a steady voice and a shaking hand. This wasn't a freak occurrence, he said. It was a predictable outcome. We've known the signs for years. He spoke of orcas in captivity, of their intelligence, their emotional complexity, their need for space, family, purpose. He described Naira's behavior not as aggression, but as symptoms of a psychological collapse. Others echoed him. Dr. Lillian Shaw, a marine welfare researcher, revealed documented patterns of repetitive behavior, food refusal, and trainer-targeted posturing in Naira's record. All classic signals, she explained, and all ignored. Dr. Carol Wells, who had spent decades observing orcas in the wild, went further. People need to understand these are not pets. They are not performers. They are apex predators designed to roam hundreds of miles a day in complex social pods. Captivity doesn't train them. It breaks them, and break them. It had scientific studies released in the wake of Elena's death revealed startling correlations between captivity and chronic stress. Depression-like symptoms, and even neurological degradation in orcas. One study showed that some captive whales had worn their teeth down to the gum line, chewing on steel gates out of boredom or rage. The image of Naira gliding through chlorinated water, ramming concrete walls, circling endlessly, suddenly felt less majestic and far more tragic. Science didn't vilify Naira, it mourned her too, because when a creature meant to rule the ocean is reduced to a performer in a pool, something dies long before the first drop of blood ever hits the water. Science had spoken. The truth had been laid bare, not just about Naira, but about the system that created her. But long after the investigations closed and the headlines faded, one thing remained: Elena Reigns' name, not as a footnote in a corporate press release, but as a catalyst. Her death changed everything. SeaWorld was fined. OSHA banned in-water orca performances. Other marine parks followed, quietly rewriting policies, quietly retiring their stars. And finally, under mounting pressure, SeaWorld announced the end of its orca breeding program. The curtain began to fall on an era built on illusion. But those were just institutional shifts. Elena's true legacy lived elsewhere, carved into hearts, echoed in silence, and carried forward by those who refused to forget. At her memorial, over 800 people gathered: trainers, scientists, former employees, families who once cheered from the splash zone. They lit candles, shared stories, and stared into the pool where it all ended. Her family created the Elena Reigns Marine Trust, dedicated to wild ocean conservation. Their mission was simple: protect orcas where they belong, in the sea, not on a stage. And something extraordinary happened. Attendance at marine parks declined, documentaries surged, and a generation began to question what they'd once accepted without thought. Children who once begged their parents to visit SeaWorld started asking why the whales weren't free. Parents didn't always have an answer, but they had a name: Elena, because her story, though written in tragedy, became a beacon. Every time someone chooses to observe orcas in the wild, rather than behind glass, every donation made to ocean conservation, every conversation sparked by her name, that is her living legacy. And it reminds us some tragedies break us, others wake us. You've been watching Animal Attack Archives, where we tell the stories that matter. No matter how painful, no matter how hard to hear, if Elena's story moved you, like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss what the surface tries to hide, because behind every roar of applause, there may be a scream that never reached the surface.